Hello, this is our presentation on Perl. I am Cameron, and I'm the first person to do the first half of the presentation, and Eric will finish up the later portions. But let's get started on Perl. Why Perl? Why did we choose Perl? I guess early on in the semester we did an assignment on Perl, and it really kind of clicked. I like the simplicity of it. It was kind of straightforward. Maybe it's because we didn't do a lot with it at the time, I guess, but easy running. We were able to pick it up pretty smoothly and kind of wanted to learn a little bit more on the programming language, I suppose. So now let's talk about the history of Perl. Perl is an acronym for Practical Extraction and Report Language. Perl was first introduced in 1987 when the author Larry Wall released the version 1.0. The idea was to create a language more convenient and more suitable for processing logs and generating reports for large quantities of data than combination of Shell, AWK, and C Shell at the time. Um, he looked for a language that will combine all of their best features while having as few disadvantages of its own. Next is the language type. Its paradigm is a multi-paradigm, meaning it can support more than one programming paradigms. Perl itself is functional, imperative, object-oriented, meaning like class-based. It is reflective, procedural, event-driven, and generic. This allows more flexibility when writing one's code to help tackle many different problems. Um, Perl is also an interpreter language, meaning uh, binary created line by line at the same time you run the code or run the program. It makes the code execute faster than a compiler language. An example would be C++. Data types and structures. Um, when you initialize any variable, you want to start it with my. Pretty simple. Learn it. Yeah. Perl has three built-in data types. It's first a scalars, which you would use by using a $sign symbol. It can be numbers, strings, can use single or double quotes. Also addresses of a variable. The second are arrays of scalars, which you denote with an at symbol, ordered list of scalars, if you will. Use parentheses to initialize instead of brackets, um, like we commonly see in, say, C++, Java. The third are hashes, and you use the % sign to show that. Same as an array, but with keys as subscripts with scalars, so it doesn't have this to be in an order. Um, when you use it, a good example is %hash equals, you have your brackets, well, no, I'm sorry, you have your parentheses, like we talked about with the arrays, and two examples from that are, you have your single quote principles, and then you have 30 followed by a single quote of 40 programming, 20, so on and so forth. And that's just how you create that, your hashes. Next are your operators. Your arithmetic operators are the same that you would pretty much see in Java and C++ that we've seen so far. The plus, the minus, division, multiplication. The modulus is the same, but a difference that they do have between what we've seen in C++ is instead of using like pow and exponent, to use an exponent, or the symbol for that is the double stars. That's what you would use for Perl instead of C++. But the plus, minus, the decrement and increments do stay the same. Assignment operators, same as we've seen before, equal to, not equal, less than, greater. You also have your logical operators, still same we've seen before, the and, or, but they do have the addition of actually writing out and or, and not unlike we've seen in the common languages that we've learned so far. The control flow of Perl. Structure is very similar to C++ and Java, but some statements can be altered. The if-else statements, for example, instead of writing else if we that we use in Java, C++, instead of spelling it correctly, else, E-L-S-E, it's actually E-L-S followed by the IF. The last E in else is dropped. I don't know why they did that. Um, Unless statements, false conditions for if statement, you do have your for loops, your do while loops, those stay the same. Next, I'll talk about the subroutines or the subprograms of Perl. Like most of the highly used programming languages, Perl allows you to define your own subprograms, more commonly called subroutines. The special thing about Perl is Perl allows for the subroutines to be placed anywhere throughout the program. Um, Things to note are the keywords do, require, and use. You can call these subroutines um, loaded in and from other files by using these keywords to, you know, grab the subroutines from anywhere that you want to get them from, essentially. Um, Now it's time to talk about the object-oriented programming of Perl. Object-oriented programming is another way of thinking about programming. Approach it in terms of data and relationship between pieces of data called objects. These objects belong to divisions called classes. Um, a way to really think about it is like in terms of hierarchy. The object leads into the class, which leads into the package or method, whichever one you want to call it, which leads into the subroutine. And because of this, Perl makes object-oriented programming neat and simple uh, because of this shortcut, easy to remember way of having it. A class is an ordinary Perl package. A method is an ordinary Perl subroutine. For each of these three basic principles, we can actually start building a data-driven application. Next, I will lead it over to Eric, who will finish the rest of the Perl presentation in part 2.